Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo, bringing you another video talking about Star Trek Online. And in this video, I'm going to go over some of the unique and special weapons inside the game, especially those ones that are really good for tank players inside of it. This is in contrast to the weapons video that I put out on the channel last month, very early last month even. I'm going over the general weapon types in the game in which you can equip your entire ship with them if you so choose. These weapons are going to be ones in which you can only equip just that one weapon once on your ship. You won't be able to equip it multiple times. And that's why it's its own unique category. In fact, on that video, there were a few comments on that video and also on other ones asking why I didn't include certain stuff, and that's why. Because there are a lot of unique weapons. A lot of them are very good. In fact, like a lot of your disruptor tank builds are going to have very few of that other energy type list just because there's so many great stuff out there for you. But anyway, I'm going to go slowly over a lot of the mission reward sets in the game that have a weapon in them. Then I'll go over the 12 reputation sets that have a weapon. And then I'll go over a couple of other weapons that exist inside of the game. Keep in mind, I'm not going to include weapons in this list that are in that old weapons list that are from R&D Crafting, that are from the lobby store as well, because I do have a separate lobby store video on this channel that actually is one of my best performing videos on the whole channel. And then also, I'm not going to be including sets that don't have a weapon in them. If you're interested in a lot of those sets, feel free to look at Timberwolf's YouTube. He has gone over a good majority of those space sets inside the game. I feel that he's done a good enough job there that I don't really need to cover that here. But anyway, feel free to see the description for all the time links for these things inside of the video. So first off, we'll go ahead and get into the mission reward sets, going in chronological order. So the first one is the Ancient Obelisk Technology set from the Solar Dyson Sphere arc. It technically has 3 pieces, but the third piece is on an 800 lobby starship. It's really up to you whether you want to actually use that starship to tank. I don't feel like it's the best one, but it is still possible to tank in it. This set has your set omnidirectional anti-proton beam array. So if you're going for a 5-3 anti-proton build, you would definitely going to be wanting this weapon. The 2-piece with the warp core does give you a little bit of extra anti-proton damage. That's the only reason why you would want to choose this warp core. Other than that, pretty simple, straightforward. It's from the Sphere of Influence mission. It's actually a decent mission. It does have some bugs in it, but they're fairly manageable. The next one is going to be the Preserver Resonant Technology set. This is the first of several disruptor sets in the game right now, just from missions. Keep that in mind that we have lots of disruptor sets. When this was released, it did have a very good niche amount of people using it because you had your resonance disruption wave that basically allowed you to shred through shields very easily. It was basically a shield resistance debuff to enemies. So it was pretty powerful. Nowadays, because of how much DPS has increased exponentially, getting debuffs on shields isn't quite as needed for your super high-end DPS players as it used to. And Disruptor is notorious for it being the one that does the most DPS. Well, I guess technically Phaser is a smidget better now, but not by much. But the 2-piece is really what you're going to be going for. The torpedo's okay, but I don't know. This 3-second this 3-step bonus thing, there's other stuff that they can give you better firing cycle haze if that's really what you're going for. Keep in mind this also has dual heavy cannons, but if you're a tank player, you're not going to use dual heavy cannons. Next one is from the Iconium War arc, Butterfly. The other one was also Iconium War, but this one is actually a set that I highly recommend if you're going to be a Tetryon captain inside the game. You have to have a very strong affinity for wanting Tetryon in order to go for those types of builds, but it is a very good set stuff for you. The Omnidirectional Anti-Proton Tetryon Beam Array is actually pretty good in terms of DPS numbers overall. The 2-piece gives you more Tetryon damage, which is nice. You could also do more defensive route and do the weapon with the temporal disentanglement suite for that extra shield resistance. This is one of the only places you can really get free shield resistance from consoles. Outside of this, you really have to go to a lot of really expensive ones, or like 2 or 3 piece set bonuses in order to get extra shield resistance on your starship. The 3-piece is decent for your EPG builds, but I don't know. There's stuff that's a little bit better for you if you want to going for science DPS builds. That's just my opinion anyway. Keep in mind, Romulans can also have the Singularity Core, and there is a Tetron turret as well if you want to go for a turret build. This is the one. This is the biggest one of all the comments that people were asking why I didn't include this set. It's from the Future Sunrise mission called the Quantum Phase Catalyst set. This one's really good. I'm saying this is a very good set. The Quantum Phase Converter is basically a universal console that gives you extra phaser damage, which is pretty nice. Some of the stuff in here basically hints that what this set is really for, just to put it very simply. The point of this set is if you're going to be a drain build captain, having a 2 or 3-piece here allows us so that it's very easy for you to do a lot of AoE drain very easily. Now, with that said, the 2-piece here for extra accuracy and this proc stuff being double as powerful, it's actually a decent proc by itself. And overall, like this 2-piece, it's very strong for phaser builds. It's just that the 3-piece is really meant for drain builds. But this is a fairly versatile and good set. So don't feel like you have to discount this set at all. This is a very good set. Megawar says dual heavy cannons for those that want to be full-on DPS captains. It's up to you. This one is from the Time and Tide mission. There is technically a 4th piece from I think it's anniversary ship. It's the Krenum science vessel from the epic drop from the Infinity Lockbox. I don't remember exactly which event it was that it was given out. Ironically, that's the one ship I have on my second account that I don't have on my primary one. Kind of weird on how that is, but yeah. Anyway, this is the first of 3 omnidirectional polarons that exist inside the game, which is really weird. None of the other types really have a lot of set omnidirectional beam arrays in the game, but Polaron has 3, so this one is an extremely good set. Like, I would say like S tier, really good if you're going for science DPS, not science tanking, but science DPS. The reason is just because of the 3-piece bonus that you get an additional up to 32% exotic damage based upon your weapon power, and up to 32% extra energy weapon damage based upon your auxiliary power, and it's a clicky for 15 seconds every 2 minutes. This is extremely powerful, especially for science, which, you know, science has the best burst damage inside the game, honestly. Instant damage. Escorts get close, but science really does take the cake, honestly. Prolonged in fights, yes, escorts, cruisers are going to beat them out over time. But outside of that, for science tanking, this tactical console is really nice because it gives you extra EPG and extra torpedo damage, which it's not extremely easy to get a lot of EPG outside of your science consoles, and so this is pretty valuable. Both of these are also pretty nice too, but especially a lot of your science builds will often just put both of these weapons in the back, and they'll have their better weapons in front, and not even really worry about these too much or upgrade them that much. So, just something to think about. This is very strong for science. And of course, we have dual heavy cannons and turrets. Really just depends upon your build itself. We have the second disruptor set here from missions, and this is one that I'm just going to say it flat out. If you're going to be a DPS captain for disruptors and you're going to use beams, then you need to use all 3 pieces of this. It's only if you're going for like a dual heavy cannon turret build would you not want to use the full 3 pieces? Using all 3 pieces of this gives you extra disruptor damage and hull penetration, and the science console gives you disruptor damage on its own too. So you really don't lose really anything for using all 3 pieces. This is an energy torpedo, which is enhanced by disruptor damage, so you're not really going to lose a ton of DPS for using this either. This is an insanely good set. So yeah, that's why my old disruptor build, you did see me have this on my starship. It's very strong. Probably one of the stronger DPS sets in the game, frankly. Now that's in contrast to the next disruptor set, which is a much more defensive route, frankly. Whenever you're doing the brush fire mission, you're given this console right off the bat. This is a very strong console with a lot of good base stats. There isn't anything fancy with this, so if you like the base stats, great. If not, don't worry about it. This is the only set omnidirectional disruptor in the game, though. So if you're going for a 5-3 build, this one you're going to have to use anyway. If you're a tank captain, since you have this, you might as well put this on too for extra critical chance and accuracy, which, because Beamfire Will lowers your accuracy, this helps to counter that slightly. Not much, but slightly. Don't use the 3-piece. The 3-piece will be just for to enhance the torpedo, which, yeah, it does a 6-second debuff of what a typical disruptor kind of proc is already going to be anyway. Also keep in mind the proc for this weapon, instead of a regular disruptor proc, it lowers it does a percentage of large damage resistance rating lowering, so your sturdier enemies are going to get a lot more powerful of a debuff than your weaker enemies. Just as an FYI. Next to last one in here is our phaser set. This is a set that I highly recommend to use the 2-piece for basically any phaser build in the game. Especially because a lot of you might not know what to fully do with the different instrument slots. The 2-piece is very strong and very good. The proc for this omnidirectional set phaser beam array is that it gives a firing cycle haste to all of your energy weapons. So it is very potent. The reinforced armaments console gives you extra power transfer rate, as well as enhances your passive and active, passive and hull capacity. Sorry. But anyway, the 2-piece gives you extra passive firing cycle haste as well. Flight speed is kind of meh. Frankly, for tanks don't need to go anywhere. It's fine. The only reason why you put the torpedo on is if you're wanting to get the 3-piece for extra damage resistance rating. I've talked about damage resistance rating in a different video for damage and shield resistance. Basically, the only reason why you'd use this, frankly, is if you need that extra console for something else special, and you're okay with losing a weapon console in exchange for an extra console on your ship for some other fancy clicky thing. This has a super long recharge, and so you're not going to get damage from this. Just kind of the way it is. And of course, this has a turret as well, but you know, I'm a beam captain. I like my beams a lot. There will be a couple of builds, probably later January, early February, in which I'm going to be starting to cover other types of builds inside the game too, besides just the beam, fire, will, and science tanking stuff that exists inside the game. I will start to cover a lot more of the more offensive tanking options inside the game too later. This last one, the most recent set for weapons, is from the Counter arc, the last mission called Home. And we have our third omnidirectional Polaron. I don't fully agree that this was categorized as an omnidirectional beam array for set purposes. I think this should have just been its own thing, and that would have allowed Polaron to have a 4-4 builds be completely forward firing with my forward fired method. And in fact, on the first day of release, I was actually able to use this along with another set omnidirectional Polaron, and it was super cool. And then they patched it out, and it actually messed up my main account for a couple of months. Anyway, this is a turret basically that if you use beam enhancing abilities, it turns temporarily into a beam array instead. This is very powerful. This is a Polaron energy torpedo, so you get the extra bonuses from Polaron damage on your ship to this torpedo as well, which is pretty nice. And the tactical console is also extremely nice because it has weapon power cost reduction on it, alongside extra Polaron damage, and it also gives it the added bonus of extra damage to foes in the rear 90-degree arc. This was released close to around time that they announced / people were starting to work on the summer ship, the summer cruiser that was 3 weapons in the front and 5 in the back. I did cover a really basic 3-5 Polaron build on this channel. It's very simple and basic, but it does at least show the concept as to why this console and why Polaron is really the best type for that particular ship. But anyway, a lot of your DPS builds for Polaron like to use the 3-piece here. For both budget and super high end, I definitely agree with you that for most DPS, low and high, are going to want to use the full 3-piece, especially if you're spamming Beamfire, Will Cannon, Scatter Volley, and Torpedo Spread constantly to get a lot of weapon damage, crit severity, and critical chance. Keep in mind, you have to be able to get these spamming constantly in order for that to really be good. And so a lot of your Ox to Bat builds is what this is going to be favoring the most. Then again, Ox Bat is still kind of overpowered in the game, but I'll be covering that in a later video this month. Anyway, that's basically it for the mission sets. Let's go ahead and get into the reputation sets now. Keep in mind, there are 12 different reputations, and so we have 12 different weapon sets from reputations to be covering in this video too. The first one is the Omega Reputations Technology set. Because its main energy weapon is the Kinetic Cutting Beam, it didn't get an alternate energy type, but it still is fairly powerful for most of your 5-3 builds, because you'll use this as kind of a pseudo omnidirectional beam array in the back. It doesn't get like extra stuff with like Beamfire Will, but it still is an extremely hard hitting weapon inside the game. There's like virtually nothing that actually fully enhances this damage. There are a few unique things that do, but most things don't. So it has an extremely high base damage to compensate for it. A lot of DPS captains also like the Simulate module with it for extra crit chance and crit severity. The 2-piece is nothing to really write home about. It's a 2.5% chance for a 3-second extra proc. Extra like weapon power and basically weapon power cost reduction to the point that your energy weapons are not going to be draining power, basically. The Mega Torpedo Launcher, you'll hear me say this a bit. It's the damage is good. The damage is good. The problem is that most plasma torpedoes, besides a very specific 23rd century plasma torpedo, are targetable. The regular torpedoes are targetable, and they do good damage, but you basically have to be right on them in order for them to actually do a lot of damage. And if you're right on them, there's some AoE damage that might hurt your ship too. Our next one is the new carb appropriated munitions set. This set was initially pretty good and pretty powerful. At least when I started the game, taking it seriously in 2014. The Universal Console was really good in that it gave power cost reduction to beam weapons. Now it's just accuracy, so not as good. And I mean, like the 2-piece bonus is nice for Tetron or Anti-Proton. It gives you a tiny bit of damage. However, and yeah, the regular proc for this weapon is actually pretty good. The problem is the only options that you have is dual beam bank. You don't have anything else really available to you, which is pretty unfortunate. Because if it was beam array and dual heavy cannon, I would actually use this on my Tetrion and anti-proton builds. Well, real anti-proton builds. The real anti-proton build I'm currently using is my Voth anti-proton build, because that's the theme for that particular captain is that he got exiled and had to commandeer a Voth ship, so he's using a Voth ship with Voth weapons. But anyway, the proc of this weapon is really good. The proc from this reputation, its weapons are really good. Just that the set one itself is fairly limiting in what you're able to do. The one thing going for the set at all, to be honest, is if you're going to do a 5-3 Tetragon dual beam bank build, Tetragon has a lot of synergies with dual beam banks. And also the Nukara console has EPG on it. So it's also one of those, if you're not going to get those off the exchange that give you extra exotic damage, this is an alternative for you too. Our next one is a Ramen Singularity Harness. If you're going to be doing a Ramen broadsiding build or a Disruptor broadsiding / 5-3 build, you're going to want to use the 2-piece on this. The Experimental Beam Array along with the 0-point energy conduit. A lot of your super high-end DPS builds already use this thing already for extra critical chance, but now that this has Disruptor as well, especially as a tank captain, what you're able to do is that you basically get the Disruptor proc plus the Plasma proc, which is super nice. And alongside that, I mean, you get as a set bonus extra Disruptor or Plasma damage. It is very nice. Now, I mean, the 3-piece has a nice 3-piece bonus for your for your beam array. However, it's at the cost of having this hyperplasma torpedo launcher on your ship. It's a good torpedo, but then again, it's also one that it has targetable torpedoes on them, and I don't like those personally. I like being able to do a lot of consistent damage and reliable damage, and if it's a targetable torpedo or mine, it's not as reliable, so it's harder to tank with, frankly. Next one is Dyson Joint Command. This is the super niche category here. I talk about this in my science tank build. The gravity from the torpedo launcher is almost a must-have to use for science builds inside the game. It's just that good. Watch that video to know for sure as to why. The whole set of this itself is based around the Dyson proton weapon. It used to be known as the experimental proton weapon, but anyway. It's a decent weapon. However, since we don't have any craftable proton weapons available in the game, and we don't have any tactical consoles that specifically enhance proton, we don't have any proton builds available inside the game, and so it's really hard to use this effectively. The only build in which I've ever really reliably used this thing was on my Rainbow build on a cruiser. And that's simply because I had to have the proton on there as an 8th energy type, because I ran out of slots, and with regular weapon slots you only have 8 energy weapons available in your regular weapon slots. You have your 6 standard ones, plus the kinetic with the kinetic cutting beam, and then a Dyson proton weapon. Most of your really good DPS Rainbow builds that you actually see that they have 8 unique energy types will typically use escorts. A version of escorts, especially the Rising Corvette, because that one's the best one of them all for tanking. Simply because you have that experimental weapon slot for a lot of different other energy types that aren't available otherwise in the game. 2-piece and 3-piece, a lot of that stuff there enhances the firing modes for the Dyson proton weapon. Not much more to say for this one, frankly. The next one is the Counter Command set. This, in my opinion, is one of the weakest sets in this entire list entirely, because unfortunately for the 4-piece set, you need to use the tactical console from a mission, which doesn't get the extra 2 energy types on it that was added with the tier 6 reputations. So you're never going to want to use Plasma or Tetrion on your sets if you're really ever, frankly. The Universal Console here is not particularly great either, because it just gives you accuracy and turn rate. There's other stuff that can do a lot more for your money and stuff for upgrading. The Environmental Photon Torpedo is, if it's not the hardest, it's definitely one of the hardest hitting torpedo high yield enhanced torpedoes in the entire game. It's also why if you get some unfortunate critical hits and you're doing an Undine map on a very high difficulty, they can hurt really bad. Not as bad as War Mines, but they still hurt pretty bad. I mean, this thing right here, it's basically, you know, your normal Undine stuff, but it does even more radiation damage and has some extra stuff on here too. This is the only thing here I would actually consider if you're going to be a tank captain to include on your ship, but it's a lot more for your torpedo build still to be using this one there. Alright, the next one is from Delta Reputation, the Delta Alliance Ordnance. This is another 3-piece set that is very good for exotic damage builds. Not as great for exotic tanking builds, frankly. I mean, I've considered having one energy weapon on my builds and have it be this one just so I can get the isokinetic cannon, which is a pretty powerful cannon, but I don't know, it's just been really hard to justify, frankly. The neutron torpedo is great on those types of builds, so feel free to include those on there. The binaural gel pack takes out one of the bigger weaknesses of the neutron torpedo of its fairly long cooldown. Plus, it also adds radiation damage to this and to your other stuff which has radiation damage on it as well. A very strong build, or a very strong set for science DPS as well as for science tanking. I think that's really about it. The reason why I don't use this as well is because it has it's basically in my energy list. This is the worst variant of Polaron for tanking in the game. Yes, if you have enough DPS and you're going for a super insanely high DPS type of build, you can work through placates to have people still attack you, but it is more difficult. And yes, it is Polaron and anti-proton. And we have dual heavy cannons. All right, the next set is from the Iconian Resistance Reputation. Ooh, how can I say this nicely? This was a very good set. Back when people were still trying to figure out some extra survival mechanics with the move from level 50 to level 60 max inside the game. Because back then people had a lot less hit points than they do now, and so a proc that gives you 1,000 temporary hit points for 15 seconds was pretty valuable on both the beam array and the torpedo launcher. The only thing that this set's really used for the most now, though, even though these are still okay, and in my end game rainbow build, I'm going to have this weapon as my Tetron beam array, frankly. Spoilers for that. Because it's just one of the better ones for it. Because of scaling with HP and that fact that this hasn't really scaled with that too much, it's not as good as it used to be. The set stuff doesn't really matter too much either. Frankly, there's just stuff that's just better stuff for your money or whatever, in-game money, or if you real money, in-game money, whatever. This is the only one that's really kind of valuable, and this is a must-have if you're going to be a healer inside the game, because it gives you a lot of bonus to both of your types of healing inside the game. Alright, now we get to one of them that basically every DPS build likes to have in some form in their build itself, and it's the Terran Task Force stuff. If you're a DPS torpedo captain, you're going to have the Terran Task Force torpedo along with this. If you're just an energy captain and you're doing disruptor, or if you're doing phaser, you're going to be wanting to have the beam array for either of them, or to have the turret, or sorry, dual heavy cannons. Keep in mind, in my list of best energy types, the Withering Disruptor was I put as my number 2, and I still stand by that for the disruptor stuff. The Terran Task Force disruptor beam right here is the Withering Disruptor with an extra proc on top of it, in which the weapon does additional damage once the hull gets lower. Yes, this is a very, 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 very good weapon. If you're doing a beam array build or dual heavy cannon build, you should be using this one here. The set stuff is really based around torpedoes. So frankly, if you're going to be doing a real torpedo build, you're probably just going to have this weapon in the back, just so you can get the secondary torpedo launcher stuff on there, so that you can activate it and your launch torpedoes launch more torpedoes. It is pretty nice. Unfortunately, in some of my science thinking stuff, I really just couldn't find a way to fully fit it into the stuff that I wanted for my ships. But it's definitely solid. This is a very solid 2-piece for torpedoes as well as 3-piece. And then this thing by itself is very strong for energy builds as well. All right, so now we get to one of the more weird sets in the game. The Thermal Defense Initiative are armaments, and the proc for the energy weapon is actually really good. It gives you a potential stacking damage resistance to your ship that lasts for 60 seconds. And the cool thing you get with this particular weapon is that you also get an instant reduction to bridge officer abilities by 5 seconds whenever this proc goes off. That is very powerful. Having bridge officer abilities come up sooner, without even having to worry about, like an Ox to Bat type of build, or having to use strategist strategist specialization is really nice. The 2-piece with the Chronoton Drive Actuator gives you just an extra like 9% directed energy weapon damage. That's also why I have this 2-piece in my Rainbow build tank. But yeah, this weapon by itself is actually pretty strong. And this does give you extra shield capacity, so it's not like you're completely losing if you're going to be thinking like, oh, well, if I have that, plus if I pretend that these stats were on this console itself, it's actually not a bad console in conjunction with the weapon, assuming that you're going to be doing an anti-proton or a Polaron build. Polaron build's a bit hard to fit that in, but whatever. You also have dual heavy cannon options as well, so for both your beam captains and your cannon captains, you have stuff available to you. The 10th one here is the Lucari set. Ooh. Long story short, I love piezo polarons. Ever since they came out, I was like, wow, they finally gave me something that I'm definitely going to enjoy and love. And so this is insanely good. They made its alternate energy variant piezo plasma, and so it's universal console, which by the way is basically just a tactical console without the critical chance that you can put in any weapon slot. It enhances plasma now as well as polaron damage. If you're a plasma or polaron damage captain, you basically have to use the 2-piece here. Right? There is no excuse not to use the 2-piece, because if you use this plus your piezo energy weapon, whether it's one of the variant types of beam array or whether it's a dual heavy cannon, not only does this thing help keep you alive, but the 2-piece bonus also gives you extra damage too. So it is extremely powerful and extremely nice. The 3-piece set is not very good. Now, I'll keep in mind, the torpedo does have a nice cool proc. That if you're a torpedo captain and you're struggling to punch through shields, this torpedo will help you punch through shields easier. It has a shield hardness debuff whenever, or a good chance to apply an AoE shield hardness debuff to enemies, and does some extra special stuff against the Zenketh, because that's what the card fight. And it's still the regular recharge time of a regular photon torpedo. It's still nice for that. The 3-piece set stuff, I've tried it. It's not like you're basically asking enemies, please destroy my torpedo instead of letting it hit you. And then you have to rely upon your allies that you're trying to help heal and stuff to fly through that destroyed torpedo. This thing's extremely situational. I do not like if you're gonna get the 3-piece, it'll be due to how strong the 2-piece is, plus you want the proc off of the torpedo. Don't get this 3-piece for the 3-piece set. That's all that I'm saying for that. Next one is obviously a strategist set. Just start looking at the 2 and 3-piece set stuff. It should be obvious right off the bat. This is meant for strictly PvP. I mean, competitive war games is already PvP oriented, so that shouldn't be a big surprise. This thing, if I'm going to be honest, this is built around mines. It's built around the mine launcher, because these are mines that scale up over time after deployment, which is very unique. And it takes 30 seconds to get to max DPS, so it'll stack up for a while, and these hurt bad, really bad. Of course, getting them to actually hit enemies is actually another issue altogether, but it's very powerful. Basically, if like whenever you're flying, you get a lot of extra stealth, so it takes enemies longer for them to see you before you're coming in. And 33%, of course, makes your mines better. The Cetran support beam array has crap damage, so you wouldn't be picking this for damage. It's that you be picking it so that you're lowering the crit chance, crit severity of enemies that you're attacking. You wouldn't be picking this for the damage itself. So yeah, I mean this is decent in that aspect, but it's really only if you're going for a Tetryon or anti-proton specific type of build in PvP with mines would you want to use this set. And honestly, quite honestly, it's actually more likely that you want to use this set for the mines and go for the mine launcher and the universal console instead of the actual energy weapon. That's all I'm saying. The last set is the Task Force Ordnances set from Gamma Task Force Reputation. I am going to say this. Deep Space Mine is fun. It's very fun to use, and if you decide to like grind the Gamma Reputation mission, some swarm a few times and get these weapons, I would encourage you to actually try out Deep Space Mine, because it's actually decently powerful if you put it right on a spawn location on the map, right as enemies are about to come in. It is pretty powerful. However, it's extremely situational as to when you're going to use it. This is our third omnidirectional Polaron beam array, and this is based upon the inhibiting Polaron energy subtype, which I neglected to include in that energy tanking video. That inhibiting Polaron, assuming that you have a fast ship, is right below Piezo Polaron in terms of its greatness as a tank as a tank weapon overall. Just as an FYI to you all. And then not only do you have a chance to do engines offline, but you also have the disruptor proc on enemies too. And as tanks, you're going to be going at full impulse almost the whole time anyway, if you're going to be an energy tanking, so this isn't that hard for this to go off. Keep in mind the Quarantine Rapid Mine Launcher. It does say that it launches mines in front of you, and arms slightly quicker than other mines, but mines in front of your ship isn't really that big of a deal, honestly. Just gonna throw that out there. The bigger thing is that this set gave us a wide arc torpedo launcher. I'll get to later in the video where I'll list a couple more wide arc torpedoes inside the game. This one's extremely easy to, well, yeah, this is the easiest torpedo one to access. There is a missile launcher, which is a little bit easier. You just play through a mission, but it's a decent wide arc torpedo that significantly reduces flight speed and turn rate for 10 seconds. Which, by the way, flight speed and turn rate is very high in terms of threat generation. So it's not to be the best in terms of DPS, but it does give good threat generation. The universal console is also great for mines, projectiles, and phaser and polar arm weapons. So it's another universal console to enhance phaser and polar arm weapons too. Alrighty, I think that's about it for this. So our last section is the other miscellaneous stuff. Keep in mind, I'm not including lobby stuff in this video. I've already included a video on this channel where I talk about that, so we're not going through those in this. So first off, here's a couple of missions that I think have weapons that you might want to consider using, especially if you're at the budget end, just trying to get through missions. I've really enjoyed using all three of these. The Freedom Arc, the Cutting the Cord mission gives you a tractor beam mine launcher. These are the only mines that I actually like using inside the game. The only ones I like using. They're enjoyable to use. Like, instead of having to get close to an enemy and like actually detonate, these are literally mines that do tractor beams on the enemy and hold them in place. It's actually pretty hilarious whenever I see it. Whenever I was leveling up for a while, even when some of the other captains I was leveling up, and I would just play this mission really early just to get this thing, and them trying to chase me, and oh, they're not stuck now, so it's easier for my enemy for my weapons to hit them. For a while in the game, one of the better ones that I like to use well for torpedoes was the Brain Transphasic Cluster Torpedo. It's a torpedo that explodes into an array of mines, and yeah, it was decent damage. Not super great damage, but it was still decent damage. I would often put this in my rear arc for a cruiser, and then if enemies got in my rear arc, it would fire and they would be in trouble. Of course, that was back when I was playing on normal difficulty. On higher difficulties, these torpedoes aren't going to be quite as good. The Valor one is actually quite a bit better. When we get this from the mission, it actually starts at Mark 13. I don't think this is technically a unique weapon. Should be, but I don't think it is. But I still felt that it merited inclusion in this video, just because this is, in my opinion, the best cluster torpedo weapon in the game right now. All right, so the next slide we have our wide arc torpedoes. So the three in the game. First off, the Centauri Master Fuse Missile Launcher, 2.5 second recharge. Not a lot of kinetic damage, it's really low there, but it has a decent amount of radiation damage and scales really well if you have a lot of radiation damage enhancing stuff on your ship. It's from the Mirror and Spokes mission, and so it's fairly easy for a lot of captains to access. For those of you that are wondering, if you're wanting to try to replicate my science tanking build and you don't have access to like the wide arc quantum torpedo launcher, just use the Centauri missile launcher on the ship, and it'll work it'll work the same or potentially even better than my build. Just saying. The wide arc quantum torpedo is available only on the Federation Tier 6 assault cruisers, which means KDF captains and KDF aligned Romulans cannot get this torpedo ever inside the game. This is one of my biggest complaints against Cryptic, actually, is that even though we have like cross-faction consoles to give us unique consoles from a lot of different ships, we don't have cross-faction weapons inside the game, because there's a lot of these ones that I wish that the other faction could be able to access. Also, that would be really cool to have 3 quad cannons on a ship, potentially. I don't think that's allowed, but that would be really cool. If we could have all 300 types of quad cannons on a ship, I would be happy to fly that. But anyway, this is a decent DPS weapon, There's nothing special about this. Just it's a wide arc version of a quantum torpedo. That's about it. This last one here is the wide angle Voth transphasic Chronoton torpedo. This one came up before the other two guys here. It was very unique and interesting whenever it came out, but it is a transphasic torpedo, which in my opinion is one of the worst, if not the worst, torpedoes in the entire game. For its raw 7 that is disconnect damage with 40% bonus shield penetration. Because of that, if you're not trying to get through shields, it's going to do not that great of damage. Its proc is nice, but its damage is pretty low. In fact, if you're actually looking at raw damage, the Centauri missile launcher at full upgrade was performing better DPS-wise than the wide-angle Voth transphasic Chronoton. And this one is able much easier. This one you have to get a specific tier 5 starship. It was in a limited time available off of the exchange from a certain particular lockbox, which, because very few people open that lockbox nowadays, it's actually a billing credit starship if you try to get it off of the exchange. It's actually cheaper if you go for Phoenix lockbox and get the ultra rare drop for a captain. Frankly, if you're going for that particular ship though, don't get it for this weapon. Get it for the console, so you can put the console on one of your other Voth ships, so you can have a cloak or potentially a battle cloak for one of the other Voth ships for either regular tanking or science tanking, because both of the other Voth ships are actually pretty good at both types. Our next one is some of our events inside the game, and we have 2 energy torpedoes. We have the crystalline energy torpedo from the 2015 crystalline event, which is now available as a very rare drop from the Phoenix lockbox, so it's actually fairly easy to access. Is an energy torpedo that's based upon anti-proton damage, so if you get anti-proton consoles, then it'll enhance this further. We also have the Agony Phaser energy torpedo, which is from the 2018 mirror event stuff. Because I was working on the survivability guide instead of doing actual stuff inside the game, I actually didn't get this torpedo launcher for my accounts. So that's also partly why you're not going to see the most optimal phaser builds in the game, simply because I don't have access to this torpedo. Otherwise, it would be pretty nice, because the Agony Phaser subtype of phaser energy types, in my opinion, is the best phaser subtype in the entire game. And it's on a torpedo that's enhanced by phaser damage. So this is a very strong torpedo launcher. If you happen to, if those of you that did this event happen to have it, access to it, put it on your phaser builds as your torpedo. It's a very good torpedo. Another weapon, which is from the weekend store, is the prolonged engagement phaser weapon, whether it's a beam array or a phaser dual cannons. Keep in mind, like, the stacking stuff here of doing additional damage. It starts at a little bit lower damage than what you would expect for a typical array or dual cannon of its particular type, which means that for budget end, where you have a lot more longer fights, these are very good. For a lot of your super high-end DPS people, they're going to start veering away from these quite a bit. Just going to throw it out there. Your super high-end ones that do over 100,000 DPS are probably not going to be using these things inside the game. There's just other things that are better and easier to be able to get right off the bat, instead of having to wait to have that damage go off. Our last slide is some other ones off of the C-store. The quad cannons for each faction. It's kind of weird that the disruptive quad cannons are from a tier 3 starship, and the phaser and plasma versions are from a tier 4 one that costs an extra 500 Zen. But if you want quad cannons for your ship, which quad cannons do some substantial damage, by the way, those are your ships to go for. Anyway, hopefully y'all enjoyed this content. If you're curious about some of the stuff that's going to be going on for the channel, or wanting to actually see my build, my actual tank builds in action, feel free to go to my Facebook page. Just search CounterYolo Gaming on Facebook. If you search just CounterYolo, then you get to my really neglected personal Facebook page. But if you go to CounterYolo Gaming, you'll get to my real channel page on there. I did recently post my schedule for December as the things I'm considering doing, and I've already prepped a vast majority of them. I just have to type out the PowerPoints now to basically do them. Just because for the most of the rest of this month, I'm going to be trying to finalize my timeline for Star Trek Online, like the actual timeline itself, start to finish, the order of every single mission, my best guess as to the actual times, like the start and end for start dates for all the different missions, what captains were in what missions, also the canon captains inside the game, because there are quite a bit of them. It's not just one captain that did all the Federation missions. There were several that was doing all those different missions. But anyway, feel free to see all that if you're interested. If you like this type of content on YouTube, feel free to like it and subscribe. If you don't like it, feel free to dislike and say stuff in the comments of things that I neglected, overlooked, things that I overvalued or didn't value enough in these different sets, and unique things inside the game too. But yeah, anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being awesome and having this channel grow so quickly in such a very short amount of time. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.